Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we have the TTI League Season 4 Top Cut deck list to review. This is an exciting time because it is the very first competitive tournaments ever organized with the Shadow of the Galaxy card pool, at least that I'm aware of. And it is the season has been, as usual, for the TTI Take the Initiative League. Games are played in a league format where people play a certain amount of games, and I think the score to be able to make the top cut is basically around the line of 6-2 that you have to do, 6 victory, 2 losses in order to get into the top cut. But the league this time was played with Spark of Rebellion. This is why I did not take part because I assumed that this season was going to be played with Spark and Rebellion in mind and the top cut included, and it turns out that they've decided, and I think that was a good idea, to play the top cut with the expansion. So I regret a little bit not taking part of this season, but that's fine. I'll be part of the next season, most likely, if I manage to qualify. And therefore, it is the very first uh, tournament with Take the Initiative with Shadow of the Galaxy with a new expansion. So obviously, always interesting, a lot of things to learn from. A lot of the things that you know from the Spark of Rebellion meta has been shaped by Take the Initiative. Take the Initiative has been a place where a lot of experimentation has taken place. There's a lot of very good players that are playing this league, and therefore it is an excellent starting point for us to explore a new list. And oh boy, new list there is in this as you can expect, of course, with almost double the card pool expanding. There's going to be a lot of experimentation being done in this season included. So I think the combination of the fact that there's nothing at stake in the tournament, combined with the fact that there's a lot of good players who are intending to play this league, and the fact that a lot of people are still want to win, those three factors combined means that the TTI environment is a very good environment to experiment and innovate. So so on this Top Cut 16, we got basically 6 Ray, which is definitely a lot. I think it's the I personally find Ray to be a pretty strong leader, and as you can see on it was rated the second highest leaders on my leader tier list that I've published previously. So I'm not surprised to see Ray seeing a heavy amount of play. I think she is clearly overrepresented in this top 16. I think 6 is definitely overrepresented, but of course, um, it can happen on such a small sample size that that a disproportionate amount of people would want to play a certain deck. For the very first time, I think in the history of I think like a very rarely, Boba has always been one of the most represented leader in TTI, but this time only one Boba has shown up, which to me is a surprise because I think Boba is possibly even stronger in Shadow of the Galaxy than he was in Spark of Rebellion. Um, the recent rule change has also helped Boba, is also possibly going to help Boba a little bit, even though it's going to be very marginal. But I think Boba is in a good place, so I think the fact that only one person has decided to play Boba in this top 16 is definitely not representative of what we're going to see in the competitive scene, I believe. Other than this, it is pretty much what you would expect. So you got a couple of Sabine. I think Sabine is still the best leader, aggro leader in the game. Some new Han. Was expecting to see a little bit more new Han being played. Um, one old Han, one player playing Tarkin, and one Cassian, which is also interesting. It's the first time that Cassian is being played in the Take the Initiative tournaments, so we're excited to see as well. So without further ado, let's jump into those different lists. I'll try to give as much insight as possible on each of those lists. So first we got SIP playing Boba with his Boba Green. SIP has been played has won the Take the Initiative tournament before with Boba Green. He actually started his own YouTube channel alongside Voltar, which is also in that top 16. So two very good players. They won a lot of tournaments in Poland, so they're very good players. So if you're looking to, and this is what SIP came up with for his Boba Green deck. So as you can see, it is has the same kind of structure as the previous Boba Green deck. We still have the ramp. We still have the same kind of global structure for the deck. I decided to replace the Darth Vader by Maul, which I think is a good move. I think Darth Maul is gonna be a better 7 drop for specifically for Boba Green, because Boba Green not only plays a lot of underworld units, which makes the ability of Maul quite powerful, and I think Maul is a bit better in an aggressive deck with his ability to deal a lot of damage and deal overwhelm damage as well. I think is very valuable in a more aggressive stand, which I think the Boa Green has always been a kind of on the aggressive side of the mid-range deck. So if there's one deck in the meta that is definitely going to be playing Maul over Darth Vader, it has to be this one. Um, Other than this, there's a couple of interesting things. So Salashku Scrum I was not expecting to see in Boba, because it is um, kind of a slow card in my opinion, and there's no specific synergy with the ping. What I like, however, is like it does Boba with his ability to untap unit. Boba does like 1 drops quite a bit, so we'll be interested to see how this works out. It does make the McClunky a lot better, so that's nice. Um, we'll see the mercenary gunship. For early space presence, one of the weakness of Boba Green was early game space presence, and this is kind of correcting that problem, even though he's basically doing this instead of the Constant Star Viper. The jetpack is also seeing play. I think the jetpack has been a card that a lot of people have enjoyed. So for people who don't know what it does, it's a 2 resource card that gives +2/+0 and can equip to a non-vehicle unit. And when it played, it gives a shield to the unit, but the shield is only temporary until the end of the phase. At the end of the phase, it just basically disappear. And it has smuggles for 4. So it is basically an equipment that is kind of used as a removal, and it does have smuggle, which can be quite valuable. The rest of the list is it's basically what you would expect from a Boba Green Boba Green list. Um, a few sacrifices have been made in order to add those to inclusion. Of course, we also have the Boba Fett's armor, which is I think an incredible inclusion for Boba. It's not going to be good against all matchup. It's not going to be good against hard control. It's not going to be good against super hard aggro. But I think that against everything else, it's gonna be an absolute amazing card. So not surprised to see it there as a 2 of. Also, I don't think a lot of people are going to be playing hard control in the early shift of the game, so I think it's in the current uh, very chaotic meta that we have, it's going to be a very good card, I believe. So yeah, very very cool and very excited to see what is going to come out. He's going to be facing Rebel Resource, which as usual is running his Sabine Yellow deck as he always does. If you guys don't know Rebel Resource, he has his own YouTube channel, and he's been playing Sabine Yellow in almost every season of the Take the Initiative, and he and also managed to bring it to the final. I think it was 2 seasons ago. So definitely a player to watch out for. And for his Sabine Yellow deck, he decided to make very few changes, not that many differences as compared to his previous version. He's playing Heroic Resolve, which I think is a very good aggressive card. The Cartel Turncoat, as well as an aggressive 1 drop that you can play alongside R2D2 to put pressure on your opponent. It makes your opponent draw a card, but it is relatively hard to kill because 3 health in space is not that easy to kill, and is not that easy to kill. So you're not. So I think it's fine. It is obviously when you want to go wide, it works very well with Red 3, for example. The rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect. We see Poe Dameron making its way into this deck. It's a little bit slow, but you can basically play it with a reduced cost with Sneak Attack, so and basically slap the base for 8. So I think Sneak Attack Poe Dameron is going to be a pretty powerful combination. He also does play the Millennium Falcon. This one I found this card to be very slow for this deck, and personally I'm really a big fan of the 5/6 for 5 in space that exists. I think is very powerful. But here decided to go for the Millennium Falcon, maybe because of the smuggle, because sometimes it does run out of cards, so maybe the smuggle helps a little bit with that. And also the Valiant Alliance ship. So if you don't know what this card does, it's a 3/4 for 4 Saboteur, and when it attacks and you got fewer resources than your opponent, it basically gets +2 attack, I think, until the end of the phase. And So it's basically kind of a 5/4 Saboteur for 4, um, because this deck very often will actually resource less than most decks. So it will be interesting to see how this works out. I was not expecting this card to see competitive play, but be interesting to see how that works out. And then the sideboard, a couple of daring raids. I didn't talk about the sideboard for SIP, by the way. Yeah, the sideboard is what you would expect. The Concept Star Viper still making to the main deck. I just want to bring your attention to the TIE Phantoms. The TIE Phantom, I think, is an incredibly powerful card against specific decks that don't have an easy answer to it, especially against control. Anything that plays Power of the Dark Side, it basically, as long as this card is in play, it basically completely disables Power of the Dark Side, because the way that works, opponent plays Power of the Dark Side, you can choose TIE Phantom. Because TIE Phantoms cannot be defeated, it basically negates the effect. So as long as you got the TIE Phantom in play, Power of the Dark Side does nothing. So TIE Phantom can be an incredibly powerful card against specific decks that don't have the specific answer that requires to deal with it. So really a big fan of this card in general, but I think in the sideboard it's going to be a must-have in almost every yellow-black decks. So coming back to the list of Ryan, so he does have so a couple of rating rates for so a bit of extra damage. Of course, the Wolf for the anti-heal, Bamboozle for the upgrade focused deck, Spark of Rebellion for the control deck, and the L337 maybe for captures synergies, or it's also a good card against control because of the smuggle extra unit that you can play from your smuggle area that are shielded can be useful in such a super grindy matchup. Then I can see this card being quite good. So yeah, overall it's not too different from the previous version that we've seen from Ryan, um, but it has a couple of new tools in there, but nothing super spectacular. I don't expect his list to be tremendously better. Um, uh, to be tremendously stronger than his previous version. I feel like the deck has not really gotten so much better. I could be wrong about this. It's kind of the feel I have. So in this matchup here, Boba Green versus Sabine Yellow, I expect Boba Green to have an advantage. Uh, Boba decks have, generally speaking, been quite good against Sabine, and I believe that Cunning is an incredibly strong card against aggro, generally speaking. With that being said, there's no shoot first in this deck. There's no so Constant Star Vipers are in the sideboard. There's a couple of things that maybe is not going to be so good against aggro. I don't know. So obviously it's very hard to call out matchup, but I would give the edge on paper. I would give the edge to SIP in terms of like the deck themselves. But obviously it can go either way. Next we got Astico with a very funny name, Cassian No Crazy About Carbon Footprint. The reason why he called this deck like this is because he's basically playing an all-in vehicle deck. Vehicle, so it's all in space, which is something that it's an idea that existed in Spark of Rebellion as well, but it was not so successful. And the reason why it was not that successful is simply because we just didn't have the critical mass of space units that are required to run an all space deck. But with Shadows of the Galaxy, we now do have enough space units to fill out an entire deck. So it's all about trying to find the ideal version here. So here from Shadows of the Galaxy, the significant upgrade that the deck gets is basically the inclusion of Carter Turncoat as well as Gunship to really gives you more consistent turn 1 play, because otherwise you're basically condemned to go with A-Wing and Alliance X-Wing. Um, and this should make the space opening a lot more consistent. So now you can basically go all in space. So what is the advantage of going all in space? Well, the advantage of going all in space is to basically ignore a big and disable and basically render useless a big portion of your opponent deck. So anything that relates to ambush on the ground, which there are quite a few of, anything that is sentinel on the ground, anything that is supposed to be interacting with ground units on the floor is going to be basically useless. And And this way you can kind of get an advantage from this. So obviously you're paying a cost for it. You have to run cards that are maybe a little bit weaker than what you would run otherwise. And if your opponent has a very specific and as a result, space specific answers become more powerful. With that being said, space specific answers are usually rarer and more difficult to come by than ground specific answers. So that's something to keep in mind. Um, so basically, the idea of the deck is very straightforward. It is an aggro deck, very proactive deck. As you can expect, whenever a new set comes around, people prefer to play proactive strategies because it's very difficult to do the other way around. It's very difficult to build a reactive strategies whenever you don't know what the meta is going to be. It's very hard to run a reactive deck. Well, so it obviously makes a lot of sense that you would want to run a deck that is very proactive. Either you're going to be running an existing deck that is indeed going to be upgraded, or you're going to be running a really proactive, a very proactive strategy that nobody has seen before to take your opponent by surprise. And that's exactly what Astico is intending to do here. So as you can see, he's running a deck that has an extremely low curve, a lot of one-drop things. We got shoot first, we got snapshot reflexes, recurring resolve, and we even have the cargo compartment. This card is basically it's a +1/+1 for one. Every time you attack, you get to ready a resource. It's a card that can be quite powerful if you can have it for a significant amount of time. And the only reason why this card did not see play is because it could only be equipped to vehicle. Therefore, it was just too situational. But in your deck that runs only vehicle, I think this card is legit. Um, and then so it's the idea is going to be running extremely low curve, a lot of very cheap vehicles and that are going to be upgraded by all those little upgrades, all those cheap upgrades. The fact that you're running those cheap upgrades means that if there's anti-upgrades, you're not too blown out because they're only like one resources. And basically you're going to get card draw from Cassian to kind of redraw your hand, alongside also some card draw from the Starwing Scout. We even go with the also with the sneak attack, to play units untapped, and you're going all in on space. The K2SO is probably here for the sneak attack. And obviously, one of the big advantages of running a space deck is to go for outmaneuver. And outmaneuver, the idea is you pay 3, and you basically exhaust all the units on the opposing arena. So the entire point of running an all space deck is to put yourself in racing situations. And obviously you're going to be running outmaneuver in order to gain an advantage in the race by basically exhausting all of the opponent units on the ground and basically win the race that way. In the sideboard, there's even more stuff to win the race. We got the Bravado, which is the card that costs 5, allow you to ready a unit, and if you've killed a unit this turn, it's only cost 3 instead of 5. So also Change of Heart, if you to get rid of one's big Sentinel units, and Spark of Rebellion to get rid of specific key card that could disturb your game plan. So as far as the deck itself, I feel the deck, honestly, I think that all space strategies are, in my opinion, stuff that are worth exploring, since we are really getting a lot more space units with this expansion. With that being said, there's a couple of things I don't like about this deck. I don't like the fact that Astico has basically no answers to big Sentinel units in space. So stuff like the Concorde, the 1/4 Sentinel in blue-white that sees a lot of play. I forgot the name. The Bright Hope. Plenty of like very big space units that are quite tough to kill. There's nothing like a waylay or something like a swoop down just to give saboteurs to your flying units to basically allow you to bypass the enemy units. Um, so yeah, that is a bit of an issue for the deck, and I would also think that maybe the deck would be stronger if it was running Han instead of Cassian. But who knows? Maybe the deck is really capable of making use of the extra draw from Cassian. And Cassian as a leader is also quite threatening. Divided 4/6 Saboteur does put some pressure on the opponent. So Astico is a very good French player, by the way, and he also works. He works from Asmodee France, by the way. So it's nice to see some Asmodee employee really taking the game very seriously. Okay, next we got the deck of Skywalker 69 and he's running a deck called Ray in the House, which is basically a Ray Green deck. So the idea of Ray Green is very similar to the idea that we had for Luke Green. So it's supposed to be kind of a rampy deck based on blue, white, green, and this deck seems to be quite standard compared to what we've seen for Ray deck. There's a couple of interesting things that I personally very much disagree with. So I'll get into this. Um, so I never seen Skywalker 69 play before, so but basically his deck, as you can see here, it takes some of the elements uh, of um, of of Luke Green, and basically expands this upon. So if we go over the card, we see the timely reinforcement, so lots of ways to give things ambush. A lot of ways to give stuff ambush. It plays the Solar Peacekeeper, which I think is a very solid card. He also plays this card, a Shoe Side, as kind of an element of surprise. Not sure how good that would be in the deck. Kuil is also a very interesting card. It does play quite a few green units, so I'm assuming this should hit relatively often. It's just a solid card in general. The only thing I didn't like about Kuil is that sometimes it will mill out your important blue card, but in this very specific deck, I think the only important blue card that it would actually mill would be Luke Skywalker. Everything else is green, so I think that's okay in this specific deck. He plays Rose Tycho, which can be quite powerful with Ray because she's 2/6 that can basically gain additional experience and can grow even bigger. Basically, Rose 6 is often just going to be a 4/8 for 4, which is honestly by itself just very solid. Um, I like the modded cohort, immediate impact on the game, and then can be buffed by Ray afterwards. One thing that I really strongly disagree with, though, with this deck is only one copy of Concord Dawn Interceptor. I think Concord Dawn Interceptor is one of the best. I think this card is an auto include in any blue-white deck. I think it's incredible. He does run Bright Hope, so maybe the idea was like he's already running a lot of 3-drops, so and he's running Bright Hope, so he doesn't need Concord Dawn Interceptor. But personally, I prefer Concord Dawn Interceptor because yes, it only has 4 health, but it can be buffed by Ray, and at least Dawn Interceptor does kill enemy space unit whenever they attack him, so you get a +1 and then a +2 attack when they get attacked, so that's quite valuable. Something that I think is just a straight up deck building mistake here is that Kylo Ren does not work if you're playing Ray, because what's going to happen here is that if you're playing Ray, you ignore the villainy aspect requirement, but you don't ignore the aggression aspect requirement. So in order to play Kylo Ren without any aspect penalty in a Ray deck, you have to be running Ray Red. There's no other way around it. So basically Kylo here is going to be 8 resources, and I'm already not a very big fan of Kylo Ren at 6, but at 8 it is definitely unplayable. So I believe this must be an unintentional mistake from the deck builder, because yeah, Kylo into ECL does sound like something pretty exciting, but in this specific deck it's gonna cost 8, so it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work at all. It doesn't work with ECL anymore. It's gonna be too expensive for you to run into timely reinforcement, so it's simply just not gonna work. So a little bit unfortunate here that he made that mistake. I guess that this is bound to happen whenever a new set comes out. So out of aspect, Spark of Rebellion, I feel like this is kind of was a desperate move from Luke Green players to fight against Control in the previous set. I don't think you need to account for this in the new set because I don't think Hard Control is going to see play. At least not super early on. At least it's going to be very niche. So not sure how I feel about this. The rest of the deck, as I said, is pretty classic. The sideboard is also interesting. So the 2 additional Dawn Interceptor as from the sideboard. So as from the sideboard, and we will see the Kilo Dragon out of aspect Curve Dragon for 11. I'm not sure how likely you are able to play an 11 Scout Dragon. Another interesting thing also is like he decided to only rely on resupply for the ramp, no Spark of Hope, which I think is I would definitely run a Spark of Hope in this deck, considering how expensive this stuff is. Anyway, couple of things. I like the deck. I like the idea of the deck, but I'm not sure about the execution. I'm not sure about the specific build. In terms of matchup, though, I would definitely give an edge to on demand. Sorry, that's on demand his name. Yeah, he actually took part of the previous TTI, so he's a good player. Um, so um I think this matchup could go either way. The fact that he's not running the full package of Kokon Dart Interceptor in the main deck is definitely going to hurt him a lot in this matchup, but after sideboard, it's probably going to get a lot better. So, yeah, I think this could go either way. It's going to be interesting. Next, we got Mars, and Mars is running a Krennic green list. As you can see, it is pretty much what you would expect from a Krennic green involving into after Shadows of the Galaxy. So he's running the Gamma Retainers, which I think is an excellent one drop. Even though he doesn't play that many green, you need to give it Sentinel. So in this specific deck, not sure how good it's gonna be. I love the Black Sun Starfighters and the Phase 3 Dark Troopers. Those are gonna be excellent pickup for Darth Vader. Um, and it does make the deck really resilient in space between the Star Vipers and the Black Sun with the ECL is going to be that's going to help a lot in space. The Bounty Hunter Quarry, in my opinion, is one of the best bounty in the game. I don't know if it's an auto include in any green deck. I don't think that is, but it is undeniably a strong card if you're playing a lot of removal spell, which is the case in Krennic. Also, the top target as a way to get a bunch of heal. Normally, to get a bunch of heal, mostly the Krennic deck would play either um, Cargo Juggernaut or Vigilance. In this case, it decides to go for top targets, which can heal up to 6 for one card for a very cheap cost, so it's quite nice to see that. We'll see. And once again, plays so many removals that it should be able to trigger it fairly consistently. The timely intervention that works with Star Viper, works with Steadfast Battalion, works quite well with Death Trooper, uh, and obviously very strong with Reinforcement Walker. So there's some good synergies here. And he's also played the Super Commando Squad as a 3-of. So I do not like Super Commando Squad. I think the card is basically, for me, it's a Vigilant Honor Guard, and Vigilant Honor Guard honestly has seen very little to no competitive play in Spark of Rebellion. Uh, so I don't see how in an even more competitive environment where there's going to be even more cards, I don't see how you can find space for this card like this. I think there's so many better 5-drops. Notably Gideon, I think is one of the best 5-drop. Is an excellent 5-drops with Krennic. So and in the space, we've got a couple of Relentless for the hard control. We got I forgot the name, the 3-2, the mercenary ship, which for the early anti-space stuff. Anti-upgrades, of course, upgrades are very powerful in this set, so you're gonna see anti-upgrades in almost every deck. So yeah, overall, I like the deck. Something I don't like about the deck also is basically no Rivals Falls or no Vanquish. So I think this deck would want to have a couple of single target removal. That would help the deck a lot in some situation. He's going to be running against Philafel, who is running the Ray deck called Plot Armor, very fitting name. So we'll see those Ray red deck. I featured this in my channel on my second video when I was showing off list. Not surprised to see Ray Red seeing some play. I think it's a strong deck, but this one is a pretty different take on the deck compared to what I've made. For me, I was really leveraging the pillage, the synergies between pillage and fourth throw. This time, decides to go a little bit more standard mid-range, playing even the Village Protector, which is an interesting card with Ray. If you manage to give her just one token, it's quite good. As a 2-2, not so great, but if you can manage to give a token, it can be quite good. We'll also see Val seeing play in a specific version, which once again can get buffed by Ray. Still eager to see what this card is going to be able to give out. The Moisture Farmers is also an interesting addition. So Moisture Farmers is cheap. You can kind of build it as a 1/5 right away, which 1/5 for 2. The problem is that it takes a very long time for her to get a significant amount of attack. Like R2D2 is much easier to build up because because you start with 1 attack. Because she starts at 0 attack, it makes her a lot longer to develop into something that can really do anything. But the Restore 2 is quite significant, so I would assume against aggro it should be quite good. 3 Fail the Dragons being used. Personally, I find Fail the Dragon to be a little bit too situational. Um, so I prefer personally to play Rivals Fall. So here I decide to play 3 Fail the Dragon, so I feel very strongly about it. And the rest of the deck is what you can expect from Rey. You get the Obi-Wan, you get the Luke, we get the Poe, and we get the Great Dragon. Kylo Ren does see play. I'm personally not a big fan of Kylo Ren in a deck that cannot give an ambush. And the problem is like you kind of have to give. If you're playing the green version, yeah, you can give it ambush, but then you can't pay for aspect penalty. And if you're running it in a Rey deck, yes, okay, you can play it without aspect penalty, but then you cannot give him ambush. And without ambush, it's a 6-drop that has no immediate impact on the game. It does have a lot of stats, but I don't think it's the kind of card that you want. But once again, I could be wrong. Maybe it's just the stat by itself is going to be enough to carry it to a playable level in this deck. Also, I think however, I do think the card is quite decent in a villainy green deck that runs ECL. In the sideboard we have this, I forgot the name, but it's a card that allows you to take control of an upgrade and equip to your own upgrade. I think against a deck that has a lot of upgrades, this can be a very good card. A couple of visions probably against aggro, a couple of rivals folk and mid range, a couple of Spark of Rebellion against hard control, a couple of make the opening to deal against Boba. Yeah, and obviously the 4th throw and all the classics, the good stuff coming in. Next we got, in my opinion, the most interesting list of this top cut. And it is, so just talk about the matchup here, versus Krennic Green versus Rey Red. I believe Krennic Green should have the edge, because he has a much better late game. With that being said, there is basically no single target removals. Crater Dragons are gonna roam free. There's a lot of very high stat units that are not gonna be easy to kill for Krennic. So that's the problem. As I was saying earlier, playing a Krennic is mostly a reactive deck, and playing a reactive deck while not knowing at all what the meta is gonna be is always gonna be a difficult task. I'm sure if he knew that he was gonna be facing a bunch of Rey decks, he would have wanted to have more Rivals Falls in his deck to have single target removals that are going to be super valuable against the Poe, against the so normally I would say I would give the advantage to Krennic, but because of the lack of single target removal and the quantity of super high stat units that there is in Falafel's build, I would actually give the edge to Falafel in this specific matchup. Moving on to Voltar, also known as Beton, who actually opened his own YouTube channel with SIP, is one of the very good, one of the very good polished players that hasn't managed to perform yet, to do a strong performance in TTI, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time. And is running what I believe to be the most interesting deck of this top 16, and it is a space Tarkin deck. So basically the idea of this deck, so it's not as all-in on space as the Cassian decks that we've seen before. It's a bit more balanced, but it's still very much focused on the space. And basically the objective of this deck is to leverage Grand Moff Tarkin's ability with TIE Phantom, basically drop a TIE Phantom. So basically TIE Phantom is a card that can pretty much only be killed by very specific card and mostly other units. It's basically kind of hard to kill with removal, but you can kill it with Sentinel units or just units that ambush it and stuff like that. But once you manage to reach a certain amount of stats on the TIE Phantom, it becomes an unstoppable force. And this deck is basically designed to do that. I mean, obviously it doesn't have only that, it basically leverages triple Dark Raid, which is incredibly powerful in this deck, and I'll tell you why right after. And it's basically just go all in space, puts tons of pressure on your opponent, tons of like experience token on the different units to make them super big and super threatening. And because it's all going on in space, it's hard to interact with. And obviously, because it's a yellow deck, it raised very well. It's going to have no good to me dead, swoop down to ignore your Saboteur. So typically, kind of a typical, the way the Rens usually runs is going to be opening up with something like a TIE Fighter, give it a shield with the Grand Moff Tarkin, and then it's going to follow by either a 7th Defender or a TIE Phantom. And then it's on turn 4 it's gonna play a triple Dark Raid, and basically the triple Dark Raid is powerful in kind of two situations. Obviously, the first scenario is like it grabs something relatively big like an ATST, or even if you have enough resource, can grab like a reinforcement walker, and put tremendous amount of pressure on the opponent. And the thing is, like, it doesn't even do card disadvantage because once the card is played, so for people who don't remember what this card does, you look for the top 7 cards for a vehicle, you put that card into play ready. I mean, you play it with, and it costs 5 less. So if it costs 6, you have to pay 1 extra. So on turn 4, you can drop the ATST or you can drop the patrol battle tank, one or the other. If you play this on turn 4. Um, if you play this on turn 6, you can actually drop a reinforcement walker. Yeah, that would actually no. That's you would need 6 resources to do that, so it's not that difficult. So you can do this as soon as turn 5. And you can also drop the Architect as well. So basically, triple Dark Raid is meant to be. And the cool thing is, like, you don't. It's not like sneak attack where you lose the card. You actually, the card gets back into your hand after you did this. So you do not do card advantage with this card, and you do 7 deep. So you don't actually have to have the, unlike sneak attack where you really need to have the 2 cards in your hand to make it work. Triple Dark Raid, all you need to do is find a vehicle on top 7, which is very easy in this deck because you play so many vehicles. So triple Dark Raid is good, mainly with 2 type of cards. So one way is allows to play a very large unit much earlier than what you should normally be, and allow to play this unit ready and then bounce this back unit back into your hand. Solution number 1. Solution number 2, it grabs something like a TIE Advance or an Outland Diverguard, cards that are not necessarily super big, but they have a very powerful when played ability. So what the way that would usually work is you got the 7th Speed Defender on turn 2, you play triple Dark Raid, you play TIE Advance, you give 2 experience token on your 7th Speed Defender. 7th Speed Defender is suddenly a 5/4. Then you get to attack with your TIE Advance, so you get to swing for 8, and then you get back the TIE Advance back into your hand. That is just insane value because you leave a 5/4 shields on the board, you get the TIE Advance back into your hand. And obviously that's only one of the many things you can do. Basically, Outland TIE Fighter is kind of the weaker version of that. It's the same but a bit weaker. Obviously, it drops ATST. You need a big blockers on the ground. You can get a battle tank. If you get 6 resources, then you get reinforcement walker, ready, draw card, attack, draw card again, bounce back the reinforcement walker back into your hand. You can never, after the play like this, you can never run out of cards. You basically dealt 6 damage to your opponent, and you drew 3 cards for 6 resources. That's absolutely absurd. I guess Architect is more like of a big ambush unit for certain situation when you need to get rid of something big in space, because obviously that's what the deck is going to be suffering against. So there's just so many cool different things you can do in this deck. So obviously it plays a lot of very large vehicles, so Piet is going to be very good, be able to give ambush to all those massive vehicles. The synergies between triple Dark Raid that allows you to find your big vehicles and Piet that gives them ambush is just incredible. There's just so many cool things going on. You got, of course, the Incinerator Trooper that is kind of a unit that is very super easy to kill, but if the opponent does not deal with it, then it can draw bigger and bigger very quickly, because between the Gram of Tarkin and Outland TIE Advances and TIE Advance, this thing can grow, and once it starts to become too big, it basically becomes kind of an Han Solo that can just attack and kill stuff one after the other. And of course there's a Surprise Strike. So it is definitely a Surprise Strike to give him +2 attack. There's the Snow Trooper, so it just is an excellent 2-drop in this specific deck. Swoop Down, of course, mostly to ignore enemy sentinels, but of course to use as a removal on the ground when you play a full space deck of a Swoop Down is very strong. And of course the good old Barrage, and this deck is just, it's disgustingly powerful. It's very, very powerful. So it does suffer against very specific kind of tools. Obviously the Waylays are going to be very strong in that kind of deck. Anything that can deal with like a lot of experience token. Bamboozle is going to be very powerful against this. So there's specific cards that really do work very well against this deck. So it's not obviously, but I think it's exactly the type of deck that does extremely well when the meta is very recent. When we are in a meta that is extremely new, this is exactly the kind of deck that perform extremely well, because it takes the opponent by surprise. It plays something that does not do something you expect. And also a little icing on the cake, it's a ridiculously budget deck. It has absolutely zero legendary in there, and it has how many rares? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rares in it. Like it's ridiculously cheap. Um, so there's a couple of very big guns in the sideboard, and it's a deck that Voltar has worked a lot on. He worked on this deck a lot. I actually did playtest. Voltar is part of my playtesting group, so I played against this deck a lot. I can tell you it's a legitimately powerful deck. I will probably make a more in-depth videos about this, but that will probably be my own version of the deck that I will be putting out. Moving on, he's going to be playing against Han Solo Blue. So, this is not exactly so it's an interesting deck. So it's a classic kind of blue, red, white shell. Using Han Solo. Han Solo is a leader that I think is just generally powerful. So it's not a surprise to see this deck being played with different kind of sauce. And in this case, he decided to go for sort of a force build. So there is Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Kanan Jarrus to enable the 4th throw, but he's only playing 2 4th throws. There's a lot of split cards. The deck has quite a significant late game here between. There's a couple of choices that are a bit odd, like he only playing 2 Luke Skywalker, for example, which in my opinion is if you're playing a mid-range blue-white deck, you have to play 3 of those. It's just too good. So yeah, it's interesting. It has a collection of a lot of things. You got the Guerrilla attack pod, which I think is very good with Han Solo because it comes out as a 5 mana, 6/4 grid that comes to play untapped. So yeah, it's kind of a super like mid-rangey shell. We see Chewbacca being played as well, which I think can be quite good in this deck because you can reduce its price and you can play it with the smuggle as well. I prefer personally Luke Skywalker, but okay, so yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of this deck. Also, the removal choice is very weird. There's basically no removal that is capable of killing large units. Um, that is able to kill large units. However, they are like he's playing like Mystical Reflection to kill very small units. So this deck is definitely going to be lacking answers, but it feels like it's a little bit all over the place. It's kind of like the main criticism I would make to it. It's a deck that wants to be aggressive, obviously, because he's playing for a cause I believe in. But at the meantime, he only has so it's a deck that wants to be aggressive. So he has very few 2 drops because obviously you want to play 3 drops on turn 1, I would say. So it's kind of it is a kind of an aggressive deck. I like the security complex, of course, in this deck because you're going to be playing units that are very low health because you're going to be using Han's ability very often. So you want them to protect them with a shield. So it is definitely an aggro deck, I would say. But it's an aggro deck that plays Courage of Dragons, Chewbacca, Redemption. All those cards are really the opposite of what you want to have in an aggro deck. So it's a little bit. I think the deck would deserve to be a little bit more focused on something specific. But anyway, I'll be excited to see what happens. For sure, he's playing a lot of good cards in this deck, so we'll see how it's able to perform. Moving on, we got Ikunu Jr., who's going to be playing a Ray Red deck again. So it is once again we'll see the Kylo Ren. He plays out of aspect aggression, which is interesting. The rest of the deck is what you would expect from this. He's playing the Pillage package with the 4th throw package. And he's also playing Black One. I don't know if this deck is able to play enough cost to make Black One worth it. But he's playing it anyway. More Than a Kid is an excellent player. He admitted to me personally that he was not very good at deck building, but he's an excellent player and he's very young. I think he's like 14 years old. Like he's very young, but he's really good for his age. So and he's been taking part in a bunch of French tournaments, and he's been doing quite well in a lot of them. So he's definitely an excellent player. And he's playing a Ray Red, which is I think a solid deck. A couple of things that I disagree with in his particular list, like mostly the Black One and the Ray, and But the rest of the list makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure how good out of aspect aggression is going to be. Um, but yeah, and yeah, the rest of the deck is what you would expect from Ray. Next we got Woji, and Woji is playing pretty much a Krennic deck, but not a Krennic deck that is running Krennic, or a Krennic deck that is running Kira. Which I think makes a lot of sense. So basically, I think if there's one deck in which Kira is going to be good, it has to be in that style of green, blue, black mid-range deck. And the reason why is because it's really a deck where that can leverages the two strong things that is going on with this card. The first thing is obviously the leader's ability. That is extremely strong combination with Skywalker Pursuer or even like a Pike Sentinel, be able to give it a shield. Even at the cost of 2 damage on the unit is very much worth it. Because shielded sentinels can be extremely annoying to deal with for certain decks. I'm a little bit surprised that we're not seeing the Enforcer, so it's basically the same as the Skywalker Pursuer, but it costs 1 less, but it does have a bounty that draws an opponent a card. I'm actually quite surprised to not see that card being played alongside the Skywalker Pursuer, or even instead of Skywalker Pursuer, because then you can drop this on turn 1 and then give it a shield. Maybe you just realized that making your opponent draw a card was too big of an inconvenience. We'll also see the client seeing play in this particular list. I found the client to be a pretty good card, but it's not nearly as good as I thought it was originally. Something that I've kind of like came about with this particular deck. So Kira, and the second thing that you want to leverage with Kira is obviously the flip card. So whenever you flip it over, you put on half health all the units in play, including the opponents, and then you heal all the units afterwards. And the way you want to use that is you want to flip Kira, and then you want to play an Overwhelming Barrage, and Overwhelming Barrage becomes tremendously better. And I think this is kind of a strong synergy with Barrage, and this is where the green is really synergizing very nicely with Kira. So I think if there's one way to play Kira, it has to be that way. And I'm excited to see if this leader is gonna be good. So we also see a couple of interesting things. Snoke, for example, see play. I think, in my opinion, Snoke is amazing and should see play in every control and mid-range blue-black deck. I think Snoke is really strong, and should definitely see play in those decks. In my opinion, I think the sideboard is very anti-control. As you can see, he's playing 3 Palpatine's Returns and an extra copy of Relentless. He's very afraid of the hard control, as it seems. Overall, I like the list a lot, and I'm excited to see what it's going to do. Next we got Vlad Dracula playing as Ray Red again. So it is a version that is, I think, a little bit closer to what I've been personally working on. We're finding in the Monster Farmers, the Pillage, the Jedi's Lightsaber coming in. I haven't been a big fan of Jedi's Lightsaber in this deck personally because I found there's just too many anti-upgrades in the meta. But maybe he's going to be able to dodge that just fine. But the rest of the deck is what you would expect from the Ray Red. I've already talked about it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And then we got a Grand Lotus, which is running a very similar deck, but once again we see Kylo Ren and Vigilance seeing a presence in the deck. Pillage is once again being played with a Redemption. Once again, the deck seems very solid. The Krayt Dragon are not making it to the main deck and going into the sideboard. I'm interested to see how Kylo Ren is going to perform in those specific deck. To me, it seems just a little bit too slow. It's kind of like, think about this as an ATST, but instead of having Overwhelm, you get the on-attack ability, which admittedly can be quite strong, but you're still playing a 6-drop that has no immediate impact on the game. So I'm still not convinced that this is going to be the way to move forward, but we'll see. We'll see. Next we can you can call me Al is bringing in is Sabine Green. So Al is an excellent Sabine Green player. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to see much of his Sabine Green on the Take the Initiative because he's very often he has decided to opt for different builds and different decks, which I think is a shame because I would love to see him play his favorite deck, the deck that he has the most experience. And I think Hal playing Sabine Green is a very scary opponent. And I think Sabine Green has had some significant upgrades with this new expansion. So Hal here, basically, I pretty much everything that he's playing here is what you would expect from Sabine Green. So he's playing He's playing the Podamron and the Wreckers at the top curver that are Podamron is just straight up better than Steadfast Battalion in this specific deck. In my opinion, doesn't require Sabine to be in play to work. Can kill something that has up to 8 health in one shot. Can deal damage to the base, and the body also is also a lot better. Just as a card that you simply drop without ECL, it's also an excellent card. We see also Wrecker being played. Since it's a top cover, you're almost always going to sacrifice a resources to get the 5 damage, which means that this card is incredibly threatening because you are dropping a 7/6. So it's definitely going to be a much more mid-rangey kind of style of aggro deck that we've been accustomed to see, which I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It just means that the deck is going to operate a little bit differently. We also see 3 copies of Heroic Resolve. I think Heroic Resolve has been an excellent aggro card, so I'm not surprised to see it at all. I guess the only I like the Darksaber as a one of the Darksaber. I think the Darksaber as a one of can be excellent on Sabine. If you can play this on the same turn as you flip Sabine, it can be incredibly impactful. And he actually has 2 additional copies of the Darksabers in the sideboard. I don't know how often you won't want to bring this in because it would make it quite awkward if your opponent is playing some anti-upgrades on the other side. But yeah, I don't know exactly. Maybe in the Mirror of Aggro is where you want to see Darksaber because it's the most likely that Sabine is going to be surviving in those specific matchup. The U-Wing Reinforcements as the anti-control tech, and the Fang Fighters to deal with enemy upgrades. So the only surprise for me in this deck is the inclusion of Grey Squadron's Y-Wing. I personally don't like this card. I think this is a card that gives the opponent a choice of where you want the damage to go are always very awkward. But obviously it goes into it gives him like a lot more presence into space. It is rebel. It is heroism. So it has a lot of things going for it. But I simply just don't like the ability. But maybe it is better than I thought. I'll of course be happy to be proven wrong as I'm a big Y-Wing fan, as I'm sure all classic Star Wars fans are. Moving on, we got Faith. Faith decided to bring, so Faith also has his own YouTube channel. I think it's called a At Maneuver YouTube channel. A very good player and has some excellent YouTube video. You should definitely check it out. And he's bringing us Han Solo Red. So Han Solo Red, basically, if you think about Han Solo, most people have been thinking either green or double red for it, and for good reason because double red got a lot of help in this new set. So there's definitely, as you can see, an aggressive deck. It runs Bo-Katan, Heroic, Renegade. Sorry, Heroic Renegade. So from some excellent 2-drop, even though it's a bit light on 2-drop, only 6 2-drops in total for the specific version. He does play 4 cards, I believe in, despite running a significant amount of non-heroic cards, with the 3 Dark Raid, 3 Aggression, 3 Bo-Katan, 2 Wild Rancor. So that's definitely not going to be as good. I love the Carabast being run, so there's definitely a couple of interesting synergies here. Because of course you can deal damage to your own unit with Han Solo, which means that very often Carabas is going to be able to deal 3 damage for 2 resources, which is actually pretty good. The rest is we're going to see all the classic aggro card. Cassian Andor is, as you can see, seeing play almost every aggro deck, as you can see. The One Rancor, very excited to see what this card is going to offer. It is definitely very well statted for its cost. We'll see if this is really the kind of stuff that aggro wants to bring. Even seeing Mace Windu. By the way, Mace Windu is seeing a significant amount of play in this specific set. So very cool to see. Card is from Spark of Rebellion that didn't see much play, kind of making a re-emergence. The advantage of Mace Windu, of course, is you can discount this price with Han Solo, so it's not that expensive. Comes into play, kill something, untap, and then go and attack the base, which is just very good in a sort of aggro deck. Black one to refresh their hand, the black one Podamon synergy, of course. And then Desperado's Frider, which is a card that I think is deceivingly powerful. Just a 5/6 for 5 in space is simply just very, very strong. Would have expected to see Wrecker in the main deck, but it's seeing sideboard play in face deck specifically. And yeah, that's basically the deck. Very cool deck. Excited to see how it's gonna operate. And we're going to move on to Dylan, the running is this called the Underwhelmer. So Dylan is, in my book, the inventor of Ray Red. He's the first person that I've met that has actually run Ray Red, and I think he is. So as you know, he's an excellent player. He won, I think, the previous edition of TTI, so it's a former TTI champion, and his deck is, as you would expect, very strong. He did some last minute changes to the deck where he did tell me that he basically swapped Pillage out of because he was fearing to see aggro and Boba deck, but now he kind of regrets. He wish he would have kept the Pillage in the deck. So in the main deck, he does play them in the sideboard, however. Um, as you can see, it is pretty much the list we've been accustomed to see. So he's expecting a lot of Boba and a lot of so he put the Macon opening in the main. But he told me now he would have rather do it the other way around with the Pillage mains and the Macon opening sideboard. But then the rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect from this list that we've seen over and again, and I think it's a pretty solid list. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it because we already seen quite a few Ray Red deck before. No Kylo Ren here, as you can see. And once again, Mace Windu is seeing play. Mace Windu is back, bro. And last but not least, we had Canal running his updated Green Hand list. So as you can see, this deck is very dear to my heart. What do I think about this list? This list is, I think it's a rebel list. As you can see, it runs the C3PO R2D2 synergies with the Fleet Lieutenants, the Wing Leader, so it's quite different from the version I've been personally playing. I think it's a deck that is very solid. That actually lost to him during the next. So currently this is the league. During the league, I actually played my Boba Yellow and I lost to him in the best of 3. So it is definitely a deck that has a lot of legs, which is not a surprise because it hasn't gotten so many upgrades from the new set. His version does not play Spark of Hope, which I think is very strong in hand green, but decided to go against that. He's just basically running Kira and the Soldering Peacekeeper. That's basically all he's running. So we'll see how an old deck can kind of perform in this new meta. Personally, I find his version to be quite solid. The only criticism I would make to his list is that I think it's quite weak to aggro. So C3PO R2D2 combo is very bad against aggro because you're basically playing units that are incapable of killing anything on the ground, which I think is a big problem. So this makes the aggro matchup like pretty annoying. And another big weakness is like he does not have a lot of presence in space. He has to rely exclusively on Falcon and Bright Hope, which in my experience is not enough. This is why I've added some Azurin Gunship into my list in order to kind of balance things out in this specific instance. But then otherwise the rest of the deck is very much what you would expect. So very cool. So this is it. This is the very first Shadow of the Galaxy tournament. Obviously, we're still very early on. People are experimenting with a lot of things. People are experimenting with a lot of different cards, and I'm personally excited to see how it's going to come out. There's tons of decks which I think are very strong that didn't see play. I think the two biggest surprise, of course, is to not see any Boba Yellow being played, because I believe Boba Yellow is going to be one of the best decks in the new set. So a bit surprised to not see anybody playing that. Once again, people sometimes have a tendency to be wanting to try new things rather than going for something that we already know is very good, and that's kind of the salt of the initiative is that it's a tournament where, yes, it's a tournament that people want to win, it's a tournament that people are trying their best to win, but it's also a tournament where people like to experiment. And this is the reason why TTI has been the origin point of many major innovations in the meta that we've seen throughout Spark of Rebellion already, and even before the game even came out. Another interesting factor that I want to say is no hand green, so basically new hand green, so with hand red with the green base. Those decks have probably been the most popular Shadow of the Galaxy deck so far, alongside Ray Red. So a little bit surprised that it doesn't see any play, but once again, it's a small sample size, top 16, so I'm sure on a wider tournament you would see a lot more of those decks. In any case, I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and I'm going to be super excited to see how things panned out, and I'll definitely do a video to debrief. As usual, I will do a video to debrief about the result of this tournament. Uh, Without further ado, I'll say goodbye and see you next time. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe to support me. Thank you so much.